The air tasted wrong before anything else did. Li Qingchen noticed it, the way he noticed most things that weren't jewelry schematics or quarterly deadlines. Peripherally, somewhere between the third coffee and the fourth argument with his new project partner, a faint metallic note beneath the recycled office air, like the ghost of something electrical. He dismissed it. He was good at dismissing things. "The setting is wrong," said Lu Mani, not looking up from the holographic draft rotating above her workstation. "The whole radial geometry is wrong. You've built a cage, not a necklace." "I've built a masterpiece," Li Qingchen said, "which you're apparently unable to recognize because they don't teach that at overseas design schools. They teach it fine. They also teach us not to confuse complicated with good." The metallic taste deepened. Li Qingchen reached for his water bottle, so did she. Their hands collided on it in the narrow space between their adjacent stations, and they both pulled back as if burned. Which was how every interaction between them had gone since the day she walked into Chenri Design 2 months ago, returned from 8 years abroad, with a portfolio that made him nervous, and a personality that made everyone else nervous. He had immediately decided she was insufferable. She had apparently decided the same about him within the first 40 seconds, and had not revised the opinion since. He picked up the bottle, drank, set it down. She picked it up, drank, set it down. Neither of them thought anything of it. The attack came 6 hours later. Li Qingchen was still at his desk. He was always still at his desk. The office emptied around him, like a tide, leaving a single barnacle. When the door opened wrong, not the slide of the automatic panel, a shoulder hit, a controlled entry. He registered the 2 figures in black before his brain fully parsed what he was seeing. The tactical gear, the compact weapons, the way they moved through the empty office without hesitation, like they had blueprints. They were heading for him. He ran. It was an undignified run. Spinning his chair backward, catching his knee on the desk corner, scrambling around the back of the drafting tables. But it was fast, and surprise was on his side for approximately 4 seconds. He made it to the stairwell. Lu Mani was already in it, coming up from the car park level, her heels in her hand, eyes wide. "Were you also?" "Yes," she moved. They moved. 4 floors of stairs, 1 wrong turn. A service corridor that smelled of pipe insulation and old maintenance logs. She knew the build skeleton better than he did. She'd been mapped it, she said later. First week, old habit from design school, where they had to draw floor plans of their workplaces from memory. He filed that information away as either impressive or alarming and didn't decide which. The vehicle waiting outside wasn't a police car. It wasn't an ambulance. It was a matte gray panel van with no markings, and the man who stepped out of it wore the same tactical look as the men inside. He was smiling. "Qingchen," the man said, using just his given name, like they were old friends. "Manny, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Li Qingchen grabbed Lu Mani's wrist. She grabbed his. They ran in the opposite direction. They were hiding in the gap between a ventilation housing and a rooftop access shed. 3 buildings over and 12 floors up, breathing hard and barely speaking, when the first mutation happened. Li Qingchen's hands. He'd cracked his knuckles against the rooftop access door, forcing it, and drawn blood across 2 fingers. Minor, barely a scratch, and now, in the orange wash of the city's ambient glow, the skin around the cuts was moving. Not bleeding more, moving. The edges were knitting together faster than any cut had a right to, the tissue seeming almost to flow like slow liquid metal finding its level. And beneath the skin he could feel something that wasn't pain and wasn't heat, but was something adjacent to both. A deep systemic vibration, like a tuning fork struck somewhere inside his bones, said Lu Mani, staring at his hands. "I don't know." She held up her own hands. On her palm, where the water bottle's cap had pressed during their run, a small red mark that should have faded in minutes. A faint pattern was forming beneath the skin, branching, delicate, frost on glass, or the tracery of a leaf's veins, except it was inside her, and it glowed just faintly in the orange dark. They looked at each other. "The water bottle," she said. He had been thinking exactly the same thing. Both of us drank from it. Something was in the water. Or something got into the water. He was already thinking back through the day. The metallic taste, the moment when the bottle sat between them on the workbench, the mid-afternoon window when he'd left his desk for the bathroom, and come back to find her already gone to the sample room, and the bottle sitting slightly differently than he'd left it. The office hadn't been as empty as it seemed. Someone had been there. Someone had put something in the water, and then sent people to collect them before whatever it was had time to. They were going to take us, Liumani said. She said it quietly, in the tone she used for design critiques when she was being precise. Not hurt us, take us. Which means whatever this is, they want it back. They want us back. Which means they've done this before, Li Qingshen said. And whatever they expected to happen, they've seen it. They have a protocol for it. The rooftop was quiet. Far below, traffic moved. Somewhere in the building behind them, the ventilation system hummed its steady, indifferent note. What are we? Liumani said. She wasn't asking him, really. She was asking the night. The night offered no answer. The pattern beneath her skin branched another increment toward her wrist, and she watched it with an expression he would come to know well in the days ahead. Measuring, controlled, the face of the person deciding to understand rather than fear. He found that he respected that and said nothing about it. And they crouched together in the city's indifferent orange warmth and tried to figure out what they had become. His name, they learned later, was not Tony. That was the name he used for everything in Chinese, the easy name, the name for business cards and introduction emails and meetings in which he needed to seem like a person rather than what he was. His actual designation was a frequency sequence in a communication range humans couldn't hear. He had been on Earth for 11 years. He had never found that amount of time remarkable. The work required it. The work was the Butterfly Plan, Di Bianzihua. It had been running for 6 years before Li Qingshen and Liumani drank from the wrong water bottle, and it had nothing to do with butterflies in any poetic sense. It was an engineering term from the Veth biological lexicon. Veth-I, Diembu, the metamorphosis protocol, a procedure by which a host organism was seeded with recombinant nanite clusters that would respond to the host's unique bioelectric signature and begin a controlled rewrite of the cellular architecture, replacing the organic baseline with something more useful, more predictable, more theors. The Veth had been watching Earth for a long time. They were patient in ways that made geological processes look hasty. They had watched the carbon-based bipeds below develop from tool users to city builders to the edge of something genuinely dangerous. And they had made a decision. Not invasion, which was expensive and messy, but conversion. Seed a population, modify the biology, harvest the result. The nanite clusters were elegant work, even by Veth standards. They were keyed to the serum, the carrier liquid, and they were designed to be docile. They would enter the bloodstream, find the cellular machinery, begin the rewrite, and in 12 hours produce an entity that was human in appearance, but Veth in fundamental architecture, remote responsive, collectively addressable, loyal in the way that a component of the system is loyal, which is to say absolutely and without question. The plan had a failure rate, of course. All biological protocols did. Some host organisms rejected the rewrite at the cellular level. Some had immune responses that broke the nanite chains. These were acceptable losses. The yield was high enough. No one at the Veth command structure had anticipated what would happen if two hosts drank from a shared vessel. The nanite clusters were keyed to bioelectric signatures. They were designed to be individual, to read one signature and lock to it. Two people drank from the same seeded source. Both sets of nanites went active simultaneously in two bodies, and immediately began doing what they were designed to do, respond to the host's bioelectric field. Problem, from the Vethoth's perspective, was that Li Qingshen and Liumani's bioelectric fields were not independent. They were resonant. She noticed it first, because she was better at noticing things she hadn't expected to be there. They were in a maintenance level of a shopping center, 2 days in, eating food Li Qingshen had paid for with a secondary account that wasn't linked to his primary identity. He was meticulous about financial hygiene, she had discovered, which was one of the things about him that was actually useful, and she had felt it. A flicker of irritation that wasn't hers. A specific flavor of frustration that she recognized because she'd been watching the original for weeks. His jaw was tight. He was thinking about the water bottle. He was angry, and she knew it was him because the Anger tasted like black coffee, and wounded pride, and the particular self-directed fury of someone who hates that they missed something. She set down her noodles. "You're feeling what I'm feeling," she said. He looked up slowly. "I was going to not say that. Why? Because it sounds insane. More insane than this." She held up her wrist. Tracery had extended to her forearm now, faint as a watermark, only visible in certain light. At rest it was invisible. Under stress it brightened. He was quiet for a moment then. Carefully, "When you were scared." On the roof. The second night when they came close. "Your hands," she said. "Yes, I felt your hands," she said. "Before you even held mine, I felt the decision you made. The one where you decided to. Go back for you," he said. "I know. I felt you decide to let me." They sat with that for a while. The maintenance level hummed. Somewhere, above them, a family was shopping for school supplies, and the mundanity of it was briefly overwhelming. "Serum did this," she said. "It was designed for one person. It got into two. It's like it's using us both as ground. Two poles of the same circuit. The modifications are accelerating in both of us," he said. He'd been tracking it. She hadn't been surprised to discover he kept a log. She kept one too in different notation. Threes. Rate. The strength. The thing where I know where you are in a building," she said. "One is strange." "That one is very strange," she agreed. He almost smiled. It wasn't quite a smile. It was the thing that happened to his face before a smile arrived. A small compression at the corner of his mouth that she had catalogued during 2 months of professional animosity, and now read, without meaning to, directly out of his nervous system via whatever junction the serum had built between them. "I don't like this," he said. "I know," she said. "I can feel that you don't, and yet you trust me more than you don't like it," she said. "I know that too." He was quiet again, then, "Do you feel the same?" She thought about lying. She was good at lying. 8 years abroad had made her very good at the professional management of what she revealed, and when. But the serum made lying to him a technical impossibility, since he could apparently feel the difference between what she showed and what she was, and she had not had time to work out how to close that channel. "Yes," she said. "I don't enjoy it either." "Good," he said. "Then we're both unhappy and both honest. And that's a workable basis for something." They caught them on day 4. It wasn't through any failure on their part. It was a net, not a metaphorical one. The Veth, through Tony Not Tony, had been running pattern analysis on every data flow in the city. Facial recognition, purchase records, mobile signal triangulation, the pressure sensors embedded in the city's newer pavement sections that read gate signatures as uniquely as fingerprints. They had been very patient and very thorough, and they had assembled the net over 3 days and tightened it on the 4th, with the specific, unhurried competence of a species that had been doing this for a very long time. The room they woke up in was clean and white, and had no visible corners. The walls were seamless. The light came from everywhere and nowhere. It was a Veth that room, built to Veth aesthetics. The species had a philosophical objection to visible joints, which Li Qingchen found himself thinking about in the abstract way his mind went when he was extremely frightened and trying not to be. He could feel Lu Manny's heartbeat through the serum link. She was awake. She was 2 walls away. She was doing the same thing he was doing, cataloging, measuring, staying very still. Tony walked in through a section of wall that ceased to be a wall for the duration of his passage and became a wall again. He looked like a person. He always looked like a person, that was the point. "The modifications are progressing well," he said, sitting in a chair that had just become present in the room. "Better than the standard protocol, actually. There's an unexpected resonance effect we've been monitoring. The bilateral exposure was accidental, but the data is interesting." "You're going to use us as a template," Li Qingchen said. "We were always going to use you as a template. That was always the purpose." "For what?" "For what you're becoming," Tony said, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "Your species is at an interesting threshold. You have the biological complexity to host our architecture. You have the neurological plasticity to run our protocols. You have this." He made a gesture that seemed dismissive, but was actually more like bewildered. "The emotional interference, the individual variance, he searched for the word, the self. It's inefficient. We remove it. and what's left is genuinely useful. And the people we were? Lu Mani's voice from the speaker in the wall. They'd put a microphone in her room, too, Li Qingchen realized. They wanted both of them to hear this. Discarded, Tony said, which is standard. The process is not reversible. It was never meant to be. Then why tell us? Because, Tony said, the bilateral resonance has produced a complication we need you to understand. The modifications in your two cases are cross-referenced. Each of your systems is using the other as a calibration signal, which means reversing one requires reversing both, which means, he said, standing, that whatever we have to do to make you compliant, we have to do to both of you simultaneously. And I need the one who is currently extremely calm in the other room to know that. The room went quiet. Li Qingzhen sat with what that meant. He could feel Liu Mani sitting with the same information. Feel the exact quality of her stillness. The stillness of someone not reacting, which was the result of a decision, which was different from the stillness of someone who had no reaction to make. He could feel her anger. He could feel it under everything. Not the hot, immediate kind, but the cold, systematic kind that had been building for 4 days and had just found its organizing principle. She was not going to do what they wanted, and she was not frightened anymore. He hadn't been either, he realized. Not for the last 30 seconds. Something had shifted. The serum, the link, both of their systems arriving at the same decision via different routes and confirming it to each other without a word. You have a problem, Li Qingchen said. Tony paused at the non-corner of the room. Protocol, Li Qingchen said, was designed to make us compliant, but you said it yourself. The modifications are cross-referenced. We're calibrating off each other. So whatever you built in us isn't running on your architecture anymore. He kept his voice even. It was easy to be even. He could feel her steadiness, like a hand under his elbow. It's running on ours. That's an imprecise understanding of. When she's scared, I'm faster, Li Qingchen said. When I'm angry, she thinks clearer. We were awful at working together 2 months ago. We argued about a brief pause, everything. But we argued well, we always argued well. You picked us because we were good at our jobs. And then you put us in the same body, basically, and we're still good at our jobs. You just can't control what that means for us, only for you. Tony looked at him for a long moment. You don't understand the scale of what you're talking about, Tony said. The Veth Collective is going to lose this experiment, Liu Mani said through the wall, and her voice was very calm. Not because you did something wrong in the design. Because you did something right. The serum works. The modifications work. You upgraded 2 humans. You just didn't get to define what upgrade meant. They were in the data core because Liu Mani had felt where it was. Not with her eyes. Her eyes had been closed for sweat and she breathed and let the serum-enhanced proprioception unfold in her chest. Like a map she was reading with her ribcage rather than her retinas. Li Qingchen had felt her reading it. He'd let his own perception go sideways into hers, and felt the building as a thermal presence, the Veth equipment, running warm in the patterns of a technology that cooled itself differently than human systems. And he'd known the data core was 2 floors below and 40 meters east before she'd even opened her eyes to tell him. They'd come through a maintenance access she'd deduced from the room's geometry. He'd opened the lock by feeling for the bioelectric latch and pushing it with what the serum had made of his hands. Not super strength, not exactly, but precision. Something like very controlled pressure applied at the exact resonant frequency of the mechanism. He'd known the frequency because she had known it. From 8 years of design school, where they had taken things apart to understand how they worked. The Veth technicians in the data core were 2 of the alien staff, not humans, not even human-shaped at the moment. Their camouflage dropped in the safety of their own facility, moving in their natural form, elongated, 6-limbed, heat shedding their excess processing, warmth from membranes along their dorsal ridge. Li Qingchen had a moment, an honest, unsteady moment of visceral alienness, of, this is not anything on Earth, before Liu Mani's steadiness came through the link and anchored him. The Veth saw them at the same moment. What followed was not, by any objective measure, a fair fight. The Veth were physically formidable. The 2 in the data core had the additional advantage of being in their own space, with access to controls and call systems. and the considerable toolkit of a species that had been engineering conflict resolution for millennia. What the Veth did not have was two people who could feel each other's next decision before it was made. Li Qingchen moved left before Liu Mani said left. She went high before he registered the thought to go high. The first Veth technician brought one of its limbs down in a precise overhead strike aimed at Liu Mani's shoulder. Li Qingchen was already under the arc and pulling her clear with both hands on her waist. And she was already rotating out of the pull to redirect the limb's own momentum into the equipment rack beside them. The rack went over with a sound like a failing server farm. The technician stumbled. The second one had a device out. Something small and dense that hummed at the edge of hearing. Li Qingchen felt the vibration against the serum substrate in his cells and didn't like it. Liu Mani threw the fallen rack's corner into the device. The hum stopped. In the sudden quiet, both Veth technicians were down. One pinned under equipment, one in the specific frozen posture of a being calculating risk and finding the numbers unworkable. And Li Qingchen stood in the middle of a Veth data core with his hands out, and Liu Mani beside him and his heart hammering, and he thought, "We did that," and felt her think it at the same moment, and the thought had a quality he'd not expected, which was, of course, the data core contained everything. That was not a figure of speech. The butterfly plan was comprehensive. It had been running for 6 years, and it had files on 412 individuals in the city alone. The full population of Chenrui Design and 6 other target organizations in the creative industries selected for cognitive profile, bioelectric complexity, neurological adaptability. Shh. They had been watching. They had been building toward a full conversion event. A single coordinated seeding. Hundreds of people. A city's creative class remade as a Veth instrument. Their designs and innovations, and the specific irreplaceable thing that made human creativity run. The noise, Tony had called it. The self. Stripped out and the husk pointed at Veth objectives. Liu Mani copied everything onto a drive that was human technology, which she had thought to bring because she thought about consequences before Li Qingchen did, which was one of the things about her he had stopped resenting approximately 2 days ago. Li Qingchen went into the communication system. He had no training in alien communication. He had no training in anything that should have made this possible. What he had was the serum's modification of his nervous system, the enhanced pattern recognition, the bioelectric sensitivity, the thing where his hands now read an interface the way a musician reads an instrument, by the subtle return of information in the vibration of contact. And he had Liu Mani, her mind running parallel and clean alongside his, feeding him the architectural logic she was inferring from the data they'd just seen. He found the broadcast array in 11 minutes. It took another 4 to configure it to the range Tony's organization used. He didn't send a signal. He sent the data, all of it, the full record of the Butterfly Plan's operation in the city, in this facility, the names and locations and methods, the evidence of what the Veth had been doing, and for how long and to whom and why, to every intelligence service, every government communications agency, every academic institution in the region, along with a packet of frequencies that the serum had taught his body, frequencies that could detect the Veth's biological camouflage and would let any human scanner identify any Veth agent in any human population anywhere within the broadcast range. Tony walked in during the last 30 seconds of the transmission. He stood at the edge of the data core and looked at them, at the overturned equipment, at the 2 downed technicians, at Li Qingchen's hands still on the interface, and Liu Mani standing behind him with a data drive, and an expression that was profoundly, exhaustingly patient. "You've sent the frequencies," Tony said. "Yes, you've transmitted the files. Yes, you understand." Tony said, "We are. What the collective is. You've sent an act of aggression to an entity that has been present in this system for 300 years. We know," Liu Mani said. "You are 2 jewelry designers with modified biology who have just declared a position on behalf of a species that doesn't know you exist." "I know," Li Qingchen said. He'd taken his hands off the interface. The transmission was done. He turned to face Tony and felt Liu Mani's decision not to step back settle into his spine like a counterweight. "But the thing about your plan, the thing you got wrong, is you needed us to not be ourselves to make it work. You needed to hollow us out and put your system in. Do that because the system you put in us just kept being us. It grew around us. Through us. He paused. We're not what you made. We're what we made out of what you did. Tony was quiet for a long moment. You know, he said finally, in the 6 years I've run this program, no variant pair has ever done what you two have done. Most individuals don't resist. Few who do so alone. Something moved through his expression. Not quite emotion, not in the human sense, but the Veth equivalent, a species-level recalibration. A bilateral resonance was always a theoretical possibility. It was considered too low probability to plan for. You planned for everything except 2 people who argued well, Lu Manny said. Apparently so. He looked at her. He looked at Li Qingchen. The collective will respond to this. Not immediately. Your transmission needs to be assessed, and the political calculus of open response is considerable. It will respond. I know, Li Qingchen said, and you're going to. Wait for it, Lu Manny said. Prepare for it. Tell people what's coming. With the evidence you just watched us transmit, give humanity enough lead time to not be completely unprepared when your collective decides how it wants to answer. She adjusted the data drive in her hand. Also, probably eat something. It's been a difficult week. The facility's emergency purge system, which the 2 fallen technicians had triggered before going down, gave them 4 minutes to leave. They left in 3. They walked out of a building that looked, like a commercial storage facility in an industrial district east of the city, into a street that was beginning to fill with the light of early morning. The city was starting its day. Delivery vehicles, early commuters, the first few pedestrians with coffee cups, making their way through the low horizontal light. Normal, ordinary, a city that did not yet know it had been observed and catalogued, and gently, systematically prepared for the kind of end that was worse than destruction, because it would have looked exactly like continuation. Not yet, not now. Li Qingchen looked down at his hands. Thing was still there. It would always be there, he understood. It was part of him now, grown through him, indistinguishable from what he'd been built to be. He could feel it the way he could feel his own pulse. Feel, at the edge of that sense. Liu Mani's pulse, running a beat off from his own in the familiar asynchrony they'd mapped over the past days like a rhythm they'd agreed on without negotiating. The design you were working on, he said as they walked, before all of this. The radial setting, I looked at it again, in the data core while you were copying files. The geometry it's not wrong. I didn't say it was wrong, I said it was a cage. It's a cage that moves, he said. If you use articulated links instead of fixed settings, it becomes a structure that reconfigures under tension. Is actually. Interesting, she said. Yes. It would take about a month to prototype. 3 weeks if we start from the framework you already have, and don't argue about the base material for more than 2 days. We'll argue about the base material for at least 3 days. 2.5, she said. As a concession. He almost smiled. She felt it before it arrived. They walked east into the morning, into the city's waking noise, into all the ordinary human things that were worth what had just been done. The deliveries and the coffee, and the people heading to offices where they would argue about design decisions, and fill water bottles and leave for bathroom breaks and return, to find everything exactly as they'd left it, because the world they'd been living in was, for now and for a little while longer, still intact. It would not always be. The collective would respond. The frequencies were out. The files were transmitted. Whatever came next would require what they just demonstrated. They had 2 people, resonant, running on parallel circuits, arguing well. They were, Li Qingchen thought, going to be adequate for that. He felt Lu Mani's agreement, quiet and precise, running just beneath his skin. Behind them, in the industrial district, the storage facility went dark.